Hey, buddy, come here, you. Hey, hi. Hi. Oh, thank you for all them kisses out of you. Hey. Hi, everybody. This is Robert Earl out here at the Eco Ranch in Far West Texas, and also I'm your Desert Chef. I'm a little out of uniform for Desert Chef, but I'm cross-posting this piece because it's going to be kind of interesting. Standing here in front of the ever-growing, evergreen moringa forest, but we're not going to talk about moringas today. I've got something else that I planted as a lark in our fall container garden, and we're going to give it a shot today, and I'm going to give you the recipe real briefly. So this is going to be kind of edited and chopped up. So come along with me. I'll show you what's going on. Of this big, huge gourd. Get that leaf from out there. There we go. This is a bitter gourd, and you can see from the size of it, I did a vlog on it, and if you saw that vlog, it is absolutely huge. I am not picking this one. This one's going to go to seed, and I'm going to save the seeds for next year. However, over here, get my hand in here, I've got one almost as big. I know I'm wiggling the camera around quite a bit. I got one almost as big, and we're going to pick this one today, and I'm going to do a recipe with bitter gourd. And I'm going to take you along on this journey as for the first time. Debbie and I actually taste fresh bitter gourd. Now I have to say I've eaten it in Malaysia, but it was in a buffet and it was a little old. So let me cut this guy down and we'll cut it up and I'll show you the steps as quickly as I can. Well, you won't be able to see my face, and lucky you, but I'm going to go ahead and cut this up. This part here is probably going to be of interest. If you don't know what a bitter gourd is, a bitter gourd or bitter melon or ampala, there's a dozen other names for it. Very, very common in Indian cooking, Chinese cooking, Malaysian cooking, and it is, by the name, bitter, severely bitter. So we're going to do the first step right here. I'm going to show you first of all the inside of it and how we can take much of the bitterness, actually it's most of the bitterness out of it. Why bitter gourd? Well, besides the fact that it's a vegetable and it is something that loves to grow in the kind of heat that we have here in the summertime. I planted this when our rainy season started the 1st of September, and I have the 2 I showed you plus 5 more on that plant. Made the mistake of over-fertilizing it and got too many male flowers and not enough females, so I've got 5 for right now until I use up that fertilizer. So what we're going to do, what I'm going to do is just prepare it in the traditional way you'd prepare it, where I am going to slice it because the meal we're going to have is pork and bitter gourd stir fry. So it calls for pork belly, which I happen to have a little piece of pork belly just big enough for Debbie and I. I have this bitter gourd just big enough, and I have all the other ingredients except for one, and I'll get into that in a minute. So let me start cutting this real quick. You're going to cut the ends off of it. I'm going to save that right there. There's my ends cut off. All right, let me put my face in here. Let's bitter gourd, right? Bitter. Might not be representative. It's not really that bitter, that little snip I just took. So, what we do, after you do that, cut it in half. Now, here's where you see, because of the red in here, because of the red right in here, that actually means that this is beginning to go overripe, which could be why that little bite I took is not so bitter. If you let it get to this point, you don't get the bitterness. So, going to take the spoon, and a spoon is a good tool to use for many, many different things. You can peel your ginger with it. You can actually peel a carrot with it. You can peel the inside of something like this with it. And the idea is, like with so many things, particularly like your hot peppers and that, you want to get the pith out. There's one. Pith is 90% out of it. Here is 2. Now, the question would be these seeds, because this is an immature gourd or melon, the question would be, are these seeds viable? There is a good chance that maybe perhaps the ones with some red around them are viable, but it really isn't quite ripe enough to be viable just yet. But just in case, let me just put the seeds in that in here. I may just try to sprout it. We really don't have enough warm weather left here to go ahead and grow another set of it. But I might give it a shot anyway. Now another tip, according to what I saw, now this is all anecdotal because I have no experience. Another tip was cut them very, very thin. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut it thin. I'll cut this. So you have to watch me cut these, because cutting thin sometimes I take my time. Well, there we are. I've got it cut up. This is half, the other half's in here. I'm going to put them right in there. So it's cut up and ready to be cooked. Actually, not ready to be cooked. It's ready to be further prepped to be cooked. Now, to take the bitterness out, so many of the websites that I saw, they say definitely about a ½ teaspoon of salt. Now, what you notice here is that was not a ½ teaspoon of salt. That was about a tablespoon of salt right there. Now, one person did suggest using vinegar. And they had a ¼ cup of vinegar. I am going to, because I know how vinegar acts, even though this is the first time I'm making it, and that was probably a tablespoon of vinegar. So I have a tablespoon of vinegar, I got a tablespoon and a half of salt. Mix it up, make sure that every inch of it is coated. And I'm going to keep mixing it and cut this, but make sure every inch of every slice is coated. It'll draw the bitterness out. Now that bitterness is good. Actually, I guess I won't cut this. I'm just going to talk through it. That bitterness is actually good. The juice that's going to come out of here is healthy and good. Now, because I personally used so much salt, it would be just horrible salt water for anyone to be drinking. So you wouldn't want to drink it that way, but you do drink it if you use a minor amount of salt. I used more salt because I want to draw more bitterness out of it because, and a lot of you are probably like Debbie, but Debbie, if she doesn't like something the very first time that you try to give it to her, she's done. She's not going to have it ever again. It's something I don't like, but I can't seem to cure it, so I want to be very careful that I do this right. A little extra salt will work. So got the salt, got it in there. I'm going to cover it up like so, and come back in an hour. Okay, I'm back. It's been an hour. Now, here's what they say to do. They say to take the bitter gourd and squeeze. And look at all that juice coming out. Now, in my hand, it looks like celery to you and I, sliced up celery, but in my hand it's got a real soft texture and a lot of give to it. Now, I'm squeezing. I'm not being overly concerned right this second. I'm just squeezing what's, what I can get right here out. And the reason is because I'm going to rinse it, and I'm going to rinse it, they say, about 5 times. So I'm going to rinse it 5 times. But here's what I wanted to show you. I'm going to set that off to one side for a second. Now, what I have left here, now remember, about 2 tablespoons, not even that, a tablespoon of that was the vinegar that I put in. So I have this bottle all cleaned out and ready. This bottle came from Big Texan Steakhouse up in Amarillo. You buy a growler, there's going to be thunder in a second. You buy a growler of their beer and this is what it comes in. Well, it also seals real nicely. You seal it like so, and I've got that much juice. Now, whoop, that much juice. Now, it's a little salty for me to just pick it up and drink it, but to add it to a soup, ooh, okay, there's that thunder. But to add it to a soup or to, a vegetable dish or something, it's perfectly all right, remembering it's got that bitterness. It just so happened that my container garden was being attacked by something, and that something was a chicken, and I told Debbie, well, if we see the chicken, we're going to kill it. Well, the chicken climbed up and got up underneath and started tearing up my moringas again. Hello. And Debbie got it by the feet. I took it and killed it, cleaned it, and it's already on the stove. And I had it in my hand less than 10 minutes ago, and it's on the stove right now getting ready to, or actually I'm going to make chicken noodle soup for us tomorrow for dinner. I'm going to add a little of this to it. So, okay, we got that set aside. Let's get on to the rest of the recipe now. Well, for our first taste of bitter gourd, and I'm not going to taste it raw like this, but for our first taste of bitter gourd in something, I picked a fairly simple recipe, but a recipe that wouldn't disguise the bitter gourd taste too much. In other words, there was wonderful recipes that involved egg. The problem is, egg is going to totally cover up the taste. Now, saying that, it's going to seem funny what I actually have done, but let me explain to you. This actual recipe, which I will post a link to both the written recipe, the web page with it, and also the YouTube video that the person put out. It calls for the bitter gourd. It's all rinsed. It's ready to go. It calls for sliced pork belly, which I was lucky enough to have. It calls for slab sugar. Now that's something you can buy in Asia and can't get here, but it's essentially brown sugar. So I have about the equivalent of brown sugar here, ready to go in there. Did I say garlic? 2 cloves of garlic it calls for. It also calls for something that we don't buy here very often. In fact, if I went to Midland, I might be able to find it, maybe possibly, and Midland's 205 miles from here. But it calls for fermented black beans. Well, fermented black beans are nothing more than dark soy sauce. Little difference, I know an Asian cook will tell me, but essentially you can get a similar flavor out of dark soy sauce. Dark soy sauce comes out almost like a molasses when you pour it. So what I've done by looking at the recipe is I have actually marinated the meat in the dark soy sauce. So that's my differences. I don't have slab sugar, I got brown sugar, don't have fermented beans. So we're all ready to go ahead. While I've been talking to you, my wok has been heating up. We're going to add a little bit, 2 tablespoons of oil to the wok, put it all together and serve it and taste it, and hopefully it'll taste good, but you will know about the same time I do. All right, I'm waving a spoon at you. For this, I could use my cooking chopsticks. I like to use this wooden spoon here. See, my wok is sizzling. Here come the 2 tablespoons of peanut oil into the hot wok. And we're going to lead off with the garlic, which, if you're like me and you've cooked with, you've done this with garlic enough, you know how yummy that smells. Now it's going to want to cook right up and start burning, which we don't want, because burned garlic is bitter garlic. In goes the meat. I put just a couple drops of water in there to get the last little bit of the dark soy. And I'm going to put another half teaspoon of dark soy in here because that wasn't quite enough. Recipe calls for, as I said before, pork belly. I happen to have some pork belly. A good substitute when it calls for an uncured pork belly, a fine substitute, is just a Boston butt roast, or even those cheap, the cheap boneless pork loin chops that you get, boneless or bone in, doesn't matter. You just cut the bone out and then you use the bones to make yourself some soup with. Now, unfortunately, I didn't take the crap off of my my wok stove, so I'm not using the high temperature of the wok stove, but I am using the highest temperature burner on this stove. Now, I didn't mention before, so why do we use bitter gourd if it's so bitter? Well, the reason you use bitter gourd, it has 3 very distinct, oh, look at this. Anyway, no more soupy sales. It has 3 very distinct advantages for you, in addition to all the vitamins and minerals that a fresh plant like that would have. You know, vitamin C, vitamin A, has more potassium than bananas. It's very helpful along those lines. but it has a substance in it that kind of makes it almost an almost artificial insulin compound in human beings, and it actually helps people with type, gosh, I don't want to say which type, with diabetes. I'm not sure which type. It actually helps people with diabetes by leveling off and not monitoring, but leveling off their blood sugar levels, which I think is pretty good. It also is really quite, it has antifungal, anti-parasitic, in other words, you got worms, it'll kick them out, antibacterial, antibiotic properties to it. The number 2 thing is that it seems to stave off, even to the point of some kind of prevention level for cancer. I think that's the 3 things. I'm thinking I'm missing something, but look it up. And then the 4th thing is, and remember the size of the thing, it actually will cure hemorrhoids. So you take one of those and stick it up your butt and it'll cure hemorrhoids. No, hello. Make a paste out of it and smear it on. Now, I don't know that. That's anecdotal. Everything's anecdotal about this because I haven't eaten it. So there we are. The meat is sauteing. Now comes the bitter gourd, the variable. We're going to saute this bitter gourd for a while. And I'll be cutting this to get rid of a lot of this dead time. Actually, that one great big bitter gourd with about a probably 3/4 of a pound of meat, I forgot to weigh everything. I could have used more bitter gourd, because when you add the salt to the bitter gourd, that juice that comes out is the water that makes up the bitter gourd, hence the bitter gourd gets smaller. So I could have used more. So we're going to saute this for a couple minutes and I'll come back. Okay, going to add the slab sugar, which in my case is just regular brown sugar, which I didn't chop up like they said, so I'm sitting here trying to break it up. There we go. Add the brown sugar. Going to stir that up. Okay. It is starting to smell like a Chinese restaurant from the outside. That is the best way to describe this. It is actually something I want to taste, but I'm going to put it off because I want to taste it on camera with you folks. Let that sit for just a couple minutes. Well, I think we're ready. Oh, God, I look ugly. No comments on that. We're ready. So we're going to add the last ingredient, which is 1 cup of water. Now there's just that last little bit of soy that I had. There's my 1 cup of water. Get all the soy out of there, put the 1 cup of water in. We're going to bring it to a boil, turn it down, and simmer it for 7 or 8 minutes. And I've got to tell you, I am pleasantly surprised by the smell and the appearance of it. It's gone from being something that wasn't all that appetizing to look at as a vegetable. Really quite good smelling. It hasn't quite come to a boil again, but I'm going to cut this off and I'll come back to you when we're ready to plate it, as they say in the restaurant business. We're going to bring it to a boil, going to cover it, simmer it for 7 minutes, 7-8 minutes, and then we're going to serve it. Well, it's done. This is what it looks like. This is what, and if those of you that do go ahead and click on the recipe or the video, this looks really close to it. Now let me give it a taste. I'm going to make sure I get some of the bitter gourd and a little bit of rice. I can tell the difference in Asian cooking. This, although it is a Chinese recipe, it tastes more Malaysian to me than anything. Here's just plain bitter gourd. The bitterness is there. There's also a sweetness to it. I haven't tasted the meat. Let me taste the meat. Normal for a Chinese meal. Well, I'm going to finish it. But I'm going to say try it. I'm going to say try growing bigger gourd or try buying it. In fact, I'm going to say don't be afraid to try new things. As long as they're not, you know, rat's intestines or something like that. Save that for Andrew Zimmern. But don't be afraid to try new things, new vegetables. If you do it just like they say, it comes out good. I like it. I like the bitterness. I think it's quite tasty. I'm going to eat more of it and try some other recipes. And you should too. So until next time, guys, this is Robert Earl, your desert chef, out here at the Eco Ranch in far west Texas, saying we'll see you later. I'm going to enjoy this meal. Maybe